The first arrow that struck the village's wooden gate was the last sound Ahyana expected to hear before dusk. She had been gathering water from the river, her dark eyes alert to every whisper of the wind, every rustle among the trees, but nothing could have prepared her for the thunder of hooves that tore through the quiet of her home. Smoke rose in jagged columns from the huts, and shouts pierced the air, men, women, and children scattering in chaos. Ahyana froze for a heartbeat, heart hammering, as a figure appeared at the edge of the smoke. Tall, broad-shouldered, a warrior cloaked in shadows, moving with the lethal grace of someone born to destruction. His presence was undeniable, commanding. He was not merely a soldier. He was a storm-made flesh, and in that instant, Ahyana knew him as Nokomis, the warrior who had haunted whispers in her people's stories for years. Nokomis moved through the village with practiced precision, a spear in one hand, a blade strapped to his hip. His dark hair was tied back with strips of leather, and his eyes were sharp, scanning every movement, every hiding place. Golden brown skin glistened with sweat from the midday sun, and a faint scar ran across his right cheek, a silent testament to battles fought and survived. He had come to raid, to destroy, yet the very moment their eyes met across the chaos, something in him faltered. His hand, steady and deadly, shook for just a breath. Ahyana ducked behind a half-collapsed hut, gripping a small knife she had hidden in her belt. She had been trained to survive, taught the ways of her people, yet the fear that gripped her chest was sharper than any she had known. She saw him now, not just as the warrior leading the raid, but as a man, a living embodiment of danger and inexplicably something more. Her pulse raced, a strange mix of terror and fascination twisting inside her. Nokomis' gaze swept across the fleeing villagers, cataloging the chaos. Yet when it landed on Ahyana, it lingered. The world around him, the screams, the fire, the shattered huts, faded to a blur. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders, her eyes wide but unbroken, her golden brown skin catching the sunlight as she pressed herself against the wooden frame of the hut. She did not run. She did not scream. She waited, unflinching. And it was that defiance, that quiet strength, that shook him more than any weapon ever could. The rest of the raid passed in a whirlwind of noise and motion. Nokomis' men secured the huts and livestock while he moved with silent intent, every movement deliberate. He had been sent to destroy, yet every instinct screamed against harming her. She was a spark in the darkness, untouchable and utterly compelling. As the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, Ahyana emerged from the shadows. She moved with careful grace, carrying a small bundle of herbs, her eyes never leaving the figure of the warrior who had torn through her village yet had paused. Inexplicably, at the sight of her, Nokomis watched. The tension in his shoulders taut, his jaw tight. Every instinct told him to stay detached, to remember his mission, yet the pull he felt toward her was undeniable. Her gaze met his again, steady and unyielding, and he realized that the hunt, the destruction, the very purpose that had brought him here, everything seemed to pivot around this moment. Around her, the village burned behind them, but for a heartbeat, time itself seemed to halt. Nokomis and Ahyana were two forces in orbit, pulled together by something neither could yet name, a dangerous gravity that promised both desire and destruction. He wanted to speak, to step toward her, to bridge the chasm between warrior and survivor, but he stayed rooted, the weight of his mission and the unknown consequences pressing down like stones on his chest. Ahyana, for her part, did not retreat. She remained poised, eyes locked on him, her own heart beat loud in the tense silence. She waited, not with fear but with courage, and it was that courage that began to erode the last vestiges of his detachment. As the last light of day slipped behind the mountains, Nokomis turned, moving back toward the edge of the village where his men waited. Yet even as he disappeared into the shadows, his mind remained fixed on her. Ahyana had become more than a survivor. She had become a question he could not answer, a force he could not fight, and a presence that would haunt his every step from this moment forward. The sun vanished entirely, leaving only the glow of fire and the shadows it cast. Ahyana crouched among the remnants of her village, the cool evening air carrying the faint scent of smoke and wildflowers. She had survived the raid, but she knew, somehow, that the man who had shaken in her presence, the warrior who had raided her home, would return. And when he did, neither of them would be the same. The night air settled over the smoldering village like a heavy cloak, carrying with it the scent of ash and earth. Ahyana moved cautiously among the remnants of her home, her bare feet silent against the dirt and scattered debris. The chaos of the raid had passed, but its echoes lingered. The faint crackle of dying fires, the groan of timbers settling, the soft sobs of those who had survived. She paused near the river, crouching to wash her hands, the water cool against her skin. Her dark eyes scanned the forest beyond the village, alert to any movement, every sense sharpened by instinct. Somewhere among the shadows, Nokomis had retreated, but she felt his presence like a shadow that refused to dissipate. Every story she had heard of him, the fearsome warrior, the relentless raider, clashed violently with the strange pull she felt. He had spared her in the midst of chaos, yet why? Nokomis had not left entirely. He crouched atop a ridge just beyond the tree line, watching the village smolder, tracking her movements. The mission that had brought him here felt heavier than ever. Every instinct screamed for him to maintain distance, to remain the predator he had been trained to be. Yet the moment he had seen her eyes, steady and unflinching, something within him had shifted. That unyielding gaze haunted him now, persistent and unrelenting. Hours passed in tense silence. Ahyana tended to the few who were wounded, her hands precise and careful, as she bandaged scratches and soot-covered wounds. Her courage was unspoken but palpable, a quiet defiance that burned brighter than any fire. Nokomis observed, his own movements shadowed by restraint. He wanted to approach her, to test the impossible bond that had begun in the chaos. But every step carried risk. Risk to the villagers, to his mission, and to the fragile restraint he was trying to maintain. The forest around him was alive with subtle sounds. The rustle of leaves, the whisper of the river, the distant cry of a night bird. His dark eyes never left her figure, memorizing each movement, the tilt of her head, the graceful sweep of her hair, the way her golden-brown skin caught the dim moonlight. Every detail carved itself into his memory, every motion deepening the impossible pull he felt. A sudden noise, a branch snapping underfoot, made Ahyana look up sharply. Her gaze swept across the clearing, cautious yet composed. Nokomis froze in the shadows, aware that she had sensed him, though not fully. She did not flee, she did not scream. Her presence alone, calm yet vigilant, forced him into a state of suspended tension. He was a warrior trained for violence. Yet in her gaze, he found something entirely new. Vulnerability, longing, and a curiosity that matched his own. As night deepened, she gathered herbs near the riverbank, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. Nokomis remained hidden, studying her, and a strange, unspoken understanding began to form between them. The world outside, the mission, the orders, the chaos of raiding, faded into irrelevance whenever her figure appeared within his vision. She had become the axis of his world, a force that unsettled him in ways he had never anticipated. Eventually, Ahyana moved to the edge of the village, where a few children had found a small cache of food. She distributed it quietly, her dark eyes scanning the forest. Nokomis watched from a distance, conflicted. He was meant to be the destroyer, the shadow that brought death and fear. Yet her resilience, her courage, and the subtle strength in every motion forced him to question every principle he had ever known. The moon rose high, silver and cold, illuminating the remnants of the village and the small figure of the woman who had captured his attention. Nokomis stepped closer, unseen, moving with care. His shadow fell across the edge of the clearing, and Ahyana paused, her instincts sharp. She knew somehow that he was near, yet instead of panic, there was only measured caution in her posture, a silent challenge that matched his own conflicted thoughts. In that quiet night, neither spoke. Their connection, fragile and dangerous, grew in intensity. Every glance, every subtle gesture carried weight. Nokomis understood, with a clarity that both terrified and exhilarated him, that his mission could no longer exist without considering her. And Ahyana, though unaware of his thoughts in full, felt the lingering presence of something profound, something that could not be explained by fear or duty alone. The forest held its breath as the night stretched on. Nokomis retreated back to the shadows, leaving her unscathed, yet the bond between them had been quietly cemented. In the silence of that moonlit night, both understood that the events of the day had changed everything. The slow burn between them, dangerous and forbidden, had begun in earnest, and neither would be able to forget the other when the dawn arrived. The first light of dawn filtered through the dense forest, painting the village in muted gold and shadow. Ahyana moved among the ruins, her movements deliberate and calm, as if she could will the day itself to pause. The raid had left the village scarred, but her people were resilient, and so was she. Every step she took was measured, aware, carrying the weight of loss, but also the spark of survival. Nokomis watched from a distance, hidden among the pines, the cool morning air brushing against his skin. His dark eyes traced her movements, memorizing every detail, the tilt of her head as she inspected a collapsed hut, the way her fingers brushed over a child's hair, the subtle scars on her forearms, silent stories of battles survived and hardships endured. She was strength personified, yet there was a softness there he could not name, a light that made the shadows of his own past feel heavier in comparison. The village stirred cautiously. Survivors emerged from hiding, faces etched with fear and fatigue. Ahyana guided them with quiet authority, distributing food and water, tending to minor injuries, and maintaining a presence that reassured without demanding. Every motion, every word she offered, drew Nokomis further into a web he could not resist, even as his mind screamed against it. He stepped closer, his boots silent on the forest floor, careful to remain unseen. Yet even at a distance, the aura she exuded, grace, courage, unbroken spirit, pulled at him, unraveling the walls he had built for a lifetime of war. For the first time, he felt the weight of restraint, not imposed by orders or fear, but by something far more dangerous: desire. Ahyana paused near the riverbank, lifting a small bundle of herbs she had gathered. Her dark eyes scanned the forest as if she could sense him. Though she did not know where exactly he hid, she had learned to read the world with caution, to trust instinct over sight. Her gaze lingered on the trees, then returned to her task, steady and composed. Nokomis exhaled slowly, forcing himself to step into a clearing where he could watch without being discovered. His presence was deliberate, calculated, yet the closer he came, the more impossible it became to maintain the distance he had sworn to keep. She had survived his raid, yet he had left her untouched. The contradiction gnawed at him, leaving him restless and aware in ways he had never known. The silence between them stretched, the only sounds the rustling leaves and the gentle flow of the river. Then, without warning, a child stumbled near the water, slipping on the muddy bank. Ahyana's hand shot out, steadying the child with swift precision. Nokomis' chest tightened at the instinctive motion, at the care and decisiveness in her movements. She was not just surviving. She was protecting, nurturing, leading, and all of it pulled him closer to a line he knew he could not cross without consequence. As she helped the child to his feet, her dark eyes met his from the shadows, and for a fleeting moment time seemed to fracture. The air between them thickened with unspoken tension, desire, and danger. Nokomis froze, aware that she had seen him, or at least sensed him. Her gaze held no fear, only a quiet challenge, a silent acknowledgement of the power she wielded even in her vulnerability. He took a hesitant step forward, then paused, caught between instinct and restraint. To reach her now would be reckless, yet to leave without acknowledgement felt impossible. She was no longer just a survivor in his eyes. She was a force, a presence that demanded recognition, attention, and perhaps even defiance of the orders he had lived by all his life. The day advanced, and the village slowly regained a semblance of rhythm. Ahyana continued her work, oblivious to the way Nokomis' presence lingered like a shadow in the trees. And though neither spoke a word, the tension between them grew, palpable and undeniable. Every glance, every movement, every silent breath carried weight. forging a bond that neither dared name aloud, yet both felt keenly. As the sun reached its zenith, Nokomis withdrew into the forest once more, keeping to the shadows, his mind ablaze with thoughts of her. He knew that the slow burn between them had begun, fierce and consuming, and that every day, every interaction, would only deepen it. And Ahyana, unaware of how closely he watched, moved through her tasks with unshakable grace, her presence etching itself into his memory, becoming a constant ache he could neither escape nor deny. The village had survived, but a storm had quietly settled in their midst, one that was neither entirely visible nor fully understood. Nokomis and Ahyana were bound by an invisible thread, drawn together by danger, defiance, and an attraction that neither could yet name. And as the forest whispered with wind and sunlight, both understood that the days ahead would test them, challenge them, and perhaps define them in ways they could not yet imagine. The forest was quiet in the late afternoon, the sun slanting through the pines in long golden beams. Ahyana moved carefully along the edge of the river, her bare feet pressing lightly against the damp earth. The village had begun to recover, huts rebuilt, fires rekindled, but the tension of the raid lingered, like a shadow cast over every step. Nokomis watched from the undergrowth. Closer than ever, his dark eyes fixed on her. He had approached under the pretense of scouting the village from the surrounding forest, yet every instinct screamed that staying hidden was no longer enough. The pull he felt toward her had grown, insistent, dangerous, and he knew he was nearing the point where restraint might fail. Ahyana paused to examine a small cluster of herbs by the riverbank. Her fingers brushed over the leaves with careful precision, noting their texture, scent, and vitality. She hummed softly, a quiet melody her mother had taught her, and the sound carried lightly on the breeze. Nokomis' chest tightened. The soft sound, the focus in her movements, the gentle curve of her posture. All of it drew him closer, against every rational thought. Suddenly, a rustling in the brush caused her to glance up sharply. Her dark eyes scanned the tree line, narrowing as she sensed movement. Nokomis stepped lightly into view, hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. His presence was deliberate, careful, his gaze steady yet cautious. "Ahyana," he said softly, his voice low, measured. It was the first time he had addressed her directly, and the sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. She straightened, holding her herbs tightly to her chest, and met his gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, only a measured caution, a careful weighing of the man before her. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice calm but firm. Nokomis hesitated, the words he had rehearsed in silence faltering under the weight of the moment. "I came to see," he said finally, "to see that none of you were harmed further. I could not ignore the village, or you." Ahyana's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment she considered retreating, but something in his tone, honest, tense, vulnerable, stayed her. She had expected arrogance, cruelty, a man bound entirely to orders and violence. Instead, she saw a man caught in the grip of a conflict as intense as her own, one she could not yet name but instinctively understood. "You spared me," she said finally, voice quiet but firm. After the raid, Nokomis' gaze dropped momentarily, shadowing his scarred cheek. "I could not..." He stopped, struggling for words that did not exist. "I could not strike you. Not then." Ahyana's expression softened slightly, though caution remained in her dark eyes. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, voice low and steady, "I am here, to watch, to make sure nothing else happens." His gaze flicked to the burned huts and rebuilding villagers, then back to her. "To make sure you are safe." For a heartbeat, the forest held its breath. The tension between them was tangible, a wire pulled taut in the space of their shared silence. Ahyana considered the man before her, the warrior who had raided her village, yet now stood as its reluctant guardian. Every detail of him was etched into her mind, dark hair tied back, golden brown skin, the faint scar that ran across his right cheek, strong frame, and wary posture that betrayed the conflict within. Slowly, Cautiously, she lowered her bundle of herbs. "Then you are far from the man I expected," she said, voice still cautious but tinged with something else, curiosity. "Yet, you are still the man I cannot fully trust." Nokomis nodded, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "I am a man of contradiction," he admitted, "as you are." They stood in silence, the river flowing between them, the forest holding its secrets. The slow burn between them ignited subtly here, a quiet acknowledgement that danger, desire, and a shared understanding had begun to entwine their fates. Neither spoke further, yet neither moved apart. The moment stretched, delicate and charged, until the distant call of a bird reminded them of the world beyond the clearing. Ahyana lifted her bundle again, turning back toward the village, and Nokomis retreated lightly into the shadows, keeping pace from a careful distance. It was the beginning of something neither could name, a thread weaving between them that promised both danger and connection. Nokomis and Ahyana now shared a silent understanding. The raid had been only the first step in a story that neither wanted to end, and the slow burn of what had begun would grow with every passing day. The evening sun sank low behind the mountains, casting the forest and the recovering village in long, golden shadows. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke from the previous raid, mingled with the earthy perfume of wildflowers and pine. Ahyana moved through the village, checking on her people, her steps purposeful and measured. Every movement she made carried the quiet authority of someone who had survived, and yet she bore the weight of the raid's aftermath with grace. Nokomis followed at a distance, silent as a shadow. He had chosen to stay near, though he knew it was dangerous to linger so close to the woman who could have killed him with a glance, or perhaps been killed by him on the day of the raid. His dark eyes tracked her every motion, noting the way her hands moved when she tended to a wound, the slight arch of her brow when she considered a problem, the subtle curve of her lips when she caught a child's mischievous smile. At the edge of the clearing, Ahyana paused, kneeling to tie a bundle of herbs together. Nokomis stepped from the shadows, hands raised slightly in peace, and she froze, her dark eyes meeting his. For a moment, the world seemed suspended. No wind, no birdsong, only the quiet, taut energy between them. "I must ask," Nokomis said, voice low and careful, "why you did not flee when my men raided your village." Ahyana's gaze held his, steady and unflinching. "I am not a child," she said simply. "I do what I must to protect those who cannot defend themselves." His gaze softened, the tension in his jaw easing slightly. "Yet it could have cost you your life. You could have been—" He faltered, the words killed and taken unspoken, hanging in the cool evening air. "And yet I am here," she replied, voice calm but firm. "Alive because I chose not to run." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And because you did not strike me." Nokomis' hand twitched, fingers brushing the haft of his spear. "I could not. Your eyes—" He stopped, frustrated by the inadequacy of words. "You are unlike any I have seen. You are not merely a survivor. You are a force." Ahyana tilted her head, dark eyes searching his. "A force that destroyed my home, yet spared me." Her voice carried a sharp edge, tempered by the curiosity he had seen before. "Why?" He took a hesitant step closer, the shadows of the trees lengthening around them. "Because I saw you," he admitted, voice low. "And when I looked, everything I believed about this mission, about myself, faltered." The words hung between them, heavier than any weapon, more dangerous than any ambush. Ahyana studied him, her dark eyes wary but intrigued. "And now?" she asked quietly, holding the bundle of herbs to her chest. "Now," he said, stepping just a pace closer, careful not to overreach. "I am here, watching, protecting, even though it should be impossible." His gaze flicked to the village and back to her. "And yet every moment away from you feels wrong." Ahyana's lips parted slightly, but she did not respond immediately. She had been trained to read people, to weigh motives and actions against words. Yet Nokomis was unlike anyone she had ever known. His presence, a mixture of danger, strength, and restrained vulnerability, stirred something she had not expected, an uneasy fascination. A curiosity she could not name, a spark she did not dare fan. The forest held its breath as they stood there, a cautious distance between them, each aware of the invisible thread binding them together. The slow burn between them intensified, delicate but undeniable, forged in the crucible of the raid, and strengthened by their shared tension. Finally, Ahyana exhaled softly. "You will not strike my people again?" she asked, her voice steady but with an edge of warning. Nokomis' gaze met hers fully, dark eyes intense. "No," he said, "not while I draw breath." He paused, then added quietly, "And not while you remain here." Ahyana studied him for a long moment, weighing the truth in his words. There was something raw and real in his eyes, something that promised both danger and protection. She nodded once, subtly, acknowledging his words without fully trusting them yet. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the village and forest bathed in twilight. Shadows stretched long, and the first stars began to appear in the sky. Nokomis remained near the edge of the clearing, a silent sentinel, while Ahyana returned to her tasks. Yet neither moved far from the other. The slow burn between them, now undeniable, had begun to define the space around them. As the night deepened, the forest whispered its secrets, carrying the scent of pine, earth, and smoke. Nokomis and Ahyana, bound by unspoken understanding and a shared past that neither could erase, would come to realize that the dangers of the world outside, the mission, the raids, the enemies, were nothing compared to the peril and pull of what had begun between them. For the first time, the war outside the village and the fire within their hearts intertwined, setting the stage for a story neither could resist, a love born in shadow and survival, fierce, dangerous, and entirely impossible to ignore. The forest was alive with shadows as the night deepened, the wind carrying a chill that swept through the trees and across the village. Fires burned low in the distance, casting flickering light on the recovering huts. Ahyana moved carefully among her people, ensuring that each child was fed, each adult accounted for, every minor injury tended. Her movements were precise, fluid, almost ritualistic, as if she could will the chaos of the previous days into order. Nokomis watched from the edge of the trees, his presence a shadow among shadows. Every movement of Ahyana's drew his attention. The tilt of her head as she listened for signs of danger, the way her fingers brushed over a child's hair, the subtle strength in her posture. He had stayed close throughout the day, keeping to the shadows, struggling against the relentless pull of desire and the impossible weight of duty. The longer he watched, the more he realized that his heart, trained for war, had begun to beat to an unfamiliar rhythm, one tied inexorably to her. A sudden rustling in the undergrowth caught Ahyana's attention. Her dark eyes scanned the forest, calculating, aware. She did not shout, she did not panic. She simply crouched slightly, her hands hovering over the herbs she had carried from the edge of the village. Her instinct was sharp, honed by years of survival, and even in her vigilance there was grace, a fluidity that commanded attention. Nokomis stepped forward, careful and deliberate, his boots silent against the forest floor. He emerged from the shadows, hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. His dark eyes met hers, and for the first time, the distance between them vanished almost entirely. The tension in the clearing was palpable. A taut wire stretched between them. "You sense me," he said quietly, his voice low and deliberate, almost a whisper over the night wind. Ahyana's lips pressed into a thin line, her dark eyes fixed on him. "I do," she replied, calm but firm. "And I do not fear you, yet." He took a cautious step closer, the muscles in his shoulders tensing with both restraint and anticipation. "You should," he said, voice low, rough with unshed emotion. "I am a warrior. I am trained to destroy. I am—" His words faltered, as he struggled with the truth that had grown heavier with each passing day. "I am a man who should not stand here with you, yet I cannot turn away." Ahyana studied him, weighing every nuance, every subtle movement, every shadowed intention. She had faced warriors before, men who demanded obedience through fear, yet Nokomis was unlike any she had encountered. There was danger in him, yes, but also something fragile, something that mirrored her own resilience. And that fragile balance, delicate as it was, both terrified and fascinated her. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "If you are the man who raided my village, what brings you to linger at its edge? To watch me?" Nokomis' gaze dropped briefly, shadowing the scar on his right cheek. "Because I cannot forget you," he admitted, voice low, barely above a whisper. "Because the moment I saw you, He stopped, shaking his head as if to rid himself of forbidden thoughts. "I could not do what I was sent to do." Ahyana's dark eyes widened slightly, and she took a careful step closer, narrowing the space between them, testing the fragile bond of trust. "You spared me," she said quietly, "yet you destroyed everything else. How can I believe in you now?" Nokomis' chest tightened. "You should not," he said, voice rough with honesty. "You should distrust me. I am dangerous. I am the storm that came for your home, and yet here I am, standing before you, perhaps to protect, perhaps to atone. I do not yet know which." The forest seemed to hold its breath as the two stood there, separated by a fragile distance, bound by unspoken tension and the gravity of shared experience. Nokomis' dark eyes searched hers, memorizing every flicker of emotion, every subtle shift in expression, and Ahyana, despite her caution, felt herself drawn to the intensity of his presence, the strange mixture of danger and vulnerability that emanated from him. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke and pine. Nokomis' hand twitched near the haft of his spear, not in aggression, but in instinct, a reflex born from years of survival. Ahyana's eyes followed the motion, but she did not flinch. Instead, she held her ground, her posture steady, her dark eyes unyielding. "You are nothing like I expected," she said softly, voice low but clear, "and yet I cannot look away." Nokomis' lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, tension easing from his shoulders, though his gaze remained intense. "And you," he said quietly, "are unlike anyone I have ever known. Strong, unyielding, and utterly impossible to forget." Ahyana tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes narrowing as she considered his words. She wanted to retreat, to step back into the safety of caution, yet every fiber of her being resisted. There was a pull here, dangerous and forbidden, that neither of them could deny. The night deepened, stars glimmering faintly through the canopy, casting dappled silver light across the clearing. Nokomis and Ahyana remained near each other, neither moving away, bound by the unspoken acknowledgement that their fates were intertwined. The slow burn between them, fierce and consuming, had grown into something undeniable, something that demanded attention, even at the risk of danger. Finally, Nokomis spoke, voice low and tense. "Tomorrow I must leave," he admitted. "Orders, duties. Yet tonight I remain. Tonight I stay because I cannot abandon what I have come to feel for you." Ahyana's lips parted slightly, the words unsaid lingering between them like a fragile promise. She knew that trust would not come easily, that the danger surrounding them was far from gone. Yet for the first time, she allowed herself to sense the possibility of connection, the spark of something beyond fear and duty, a bond that was fragile, dangerous, but undeniable. As the night stretched on, the forest whispered its secrets, carrying the tension, desire, and unspoken understanding between the two warriors. Nokomis and Ahyana, bound by circumstance and choice, were now caught in a story that neither could resist. A story of fire and shadow, of danger and attraction, and of a slow-burning connection that would shape the days to come. The first light of dawn spilled over the horizon, brushing the forest in pale gold and silver. The village had regained a fragile sense of normalcy. Smoke rose gently from rebuilt fires, and children's laughter echoed faintly through the clearing. Yet for Nokomis and Ahyana, peace was distant, replaced by a tension as raw and urgent as the morning wind. Ahyana moved along the riverbank, gathering water in a carved wooden vessel, her long black hair catching the light as she bent gracefully. Her dark eyes, alert and sharp, scanned the surroundings even in routine motion, a habit forged by hardship. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves, was accounted for in her mind. She carried herself with calm authority, aware that danger had not truly left her. Even as the village healed, Nokomis emerged from the forest, moving silently, his warrior's instincts attuned to every detail around them. His dark hair was tied back, the scar along his right cheek catching the morning light, golden brown skin glowing faintly. He carried his spear loosely at his side, but it was the presence in his eyes, watchful, intense, that marked him as a man both dangerous and undeniably drawn to the woman before him. Their eyes met across the riverbank, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Neither spoke at first, the space thick with the accumulated tension of days spent in watchful proximity. The slow burn of their connection, once subtle, had grown into a force neither could ignore, compelling each step, each glance, each heartbeat. A sudden cry from the village shattered the fragile calm. A child had wandered too close to the river's edge, slipping on the muddy bank. Ahyana's hands shot out instinctively, steadying the child and pulling him to safety. Nokomis moved instantly, stepping forward, but slowed as he observed her deft handling of the situation. Her movements were precise, strong, confident, a reflection of everything he had come to admire and fear in equal measure. For the first time, Nokomis spoke without caution, voice low but firm. "Ahyana." She turned sharply, dark eyes locking onto his. "Why do you follow me?" she asked, calm but wary. "Are you here to help or to spy?" "I am here," he said, stepping closer, "because I cannot leave, because I am bound to you now whether I wish it or not, and because you—" His words faltered under the weight of unspoken desire. "You are impossible to forget." Ahyana studied him, every muscle in her body tense, every instinct alert, yet she did not move away. "You are the man who destroyed my home," she said, voice low but unyielding, "and yet you stand here saying you care." "I do care," he admitted, dark eyes unwavering. "I have cared since the moment I saw you, and I will care until the day I die. I am a warrior, Ahyana, trained for destruction, yet here I am, standing for something I cannot define, something I cannot escape. And that is you." The words, raw and unguarded, pierced the distance between them. Ahyana's lips parted slightly, a flicker of emotion passing through her dark eyes, fear, fascination, curiosity, and a reluctant acknowledgement of desire. She had resisted for so long, yet here, in the quiet of the early morning, with the forest and river bearing witness, resistance faltered. Nokomis moved closer still, stopping only a breath away. His presence was overwhelming, commanding, dangerous, and utterly magnetic. The air between them crackled with tension, the culmination of days spent in shadowed observation and subtle exchange. "You could leave," Ahyana said softly, voice barely above the rustling wind. "You could go back to your orders, to your mission." "I could," he said, dark eyes locking onto hers, "but I will not. Not while you are here. Not while I feel this." He gestured vaguely between them, words failing him, yet his intent unmistakable. "Not while I am alive." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The world seemed to contract to the narrow space between them. The slow burn of desire, fear, and trust, coiling tighter with every second. Finally, Ahyana exhaled, a soft sound that carried both surrender and challenge. "Then," she said quietly, "you are bound to face me as I am, without pretense, without hiding. We are equals, Nokomis. If you are to remain, you do so fully." "I am," he replied simply, voice low, deliberate. "I am here, fully." The river reflected the first light of day, silver and golden, mirroring the unspoken bond between them. For the first time, the distance of caution and the weight of past violence seemed to dissolve, replaced by a fragile, terrifying, exhilarating connection. Nokomis and Ahyana, once enemies by circumstance, now stood as two forces inextricably bound by fate, desire, and the slow-burning fire of recognition. The forest whispered its secrets, the village stirred to life, and the slow burn that had consumed them from the shadows now stood on the threshold of acknowledgement. They did not speak of love yet, but in the tension, the shared breaths, the silent acknowledgement of each other's presence, they both knew nothing would ever be the same. The story of Nokomis and Ahyana, born in fire and shadow, had reached a turning point. The warrior who raided a village and the woman who endured its devastation now stood together, bound by danger, desire, and an unspoken understanding that neither could deny. And though the future remained uncertain, one truth was undeniable. The slow burn between them had ignited, and its flames would shape the days and nights to come.